Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Labor and Public Employees Committee's task force to study cancer relief benefits for firefighters. I will convene the meeting. It is now 12:09 p.m. and I will open the floor for welcoming remarks, starting with my Labor co-chair, the illustrious Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Representative Porter. And I just want to, I won't belabor the point. I know that we are getting started a little late and we want to hear from everyone, but I do want to wish everyone a very happy new year. And I hope everyone is safe and healthy and we can look forward to a productive meeting and a productive year. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, happy new year, everyone. I will ask next for welcoming remarks from our esteemed Representative Aurora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy New Year to everyone, and let's get going on making progress and solving this problem here or addressing this issue. Happy New Year again.
Thank you, Representative. And I do not see any other legislators with us right now. We may have Senator Flexer and Representative, help me, Julie. Why am I forgetting? Representative Fox, yes, Dan may be joining us later, but we will go ahead and get started. And I would just like to welcome our guest today, Mrs. Caroline Johnson, who is the wife of firefighter from New Britain, who was with the fire department for 10 years. Unfortunately, was diagnosed with cancer, I believe his 8th year in service. And she is here today continuing to fight the good fight. We had the pleasure of hearing from her during the time we were trying to get the bill done last year. And we brought her back again because we do realize the power of story and her great efforts in advocating on this very important issue. So I will allow Caroline at this time to have the floor, and please introduce yourself and present to us what it is you would like for us to know today concerning why you're here and why you're still advocating on this issue.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. I've been working hard on this, trying to, figure out how to make an impact, how to make this work, how to get you all on board, basically. So just a little background on me. My name is Caroline Johnson. My husband was a firefighter for the New Britain Fire Department for 10 years. We have three boys, ages now 13 and twins that are 10. So when my husband was diagnosed, my twins were 2.5 and our oldest was 5. Yes, so that's right. He was 2.5 and 5. And as he got sicker and sicker and things were going in a really downward direction, unfortunately, they were a very young age when he passed. They were 8 and 5. And that's unacceptable to me. So a little bit about my husband. He was obviously a New Britain firefighter. When he was a young child, all he ever wanted to do was be a firefighter. It's all he ever talked about. It's all he ever wanted. And he became a firefighter in recruit class 40 in 2007. Unfortunately, it's the same profession that he loved so much that took his life on August 16th of 2017. He was 43 years old, and I became a widow and a single mom at the age of 41. So he was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer in April of 2015. Colorectal cancer is an up-and-coming young person's disease. We don't know why, but the life expectancy for somebody who's diagnosed with a stage 4 diagnosis, such as he was, is roughly 2.5 years. And his life ended 2 years and 4 months later after that diagnosis. And he was healthy. He rode his bike, he ran, he didn't smoke, no history of cancer, nothing. So I always ask why, how did this happen? It's such a young age. And I know we're hearing more and more all the time about these young people in this profession, younger and younger all the time, getting sick. So that's why I'm here today. During the course of his illness, I supported him. I stood by his side. I was his voice on the days when he couldn't speak because he was too weak. I advocated for him. I worked for him. I still work for him. I'm here today working for him. I've done research on this and I've looked it up, and I know that firefighters have a 14% higher chance of dying from cancer than the rest of us. It's because of what they're inhaling. It's the, different situations that they're put in, and, it's their turnout gear. And I know that a lot is being done to fix that, to, have 2 sets of gear, to wash their gear, to, put it in the washer, to shower as soon as they come back. But clearly something's still missing because they're still getting sick and they're still dying. My husband, when he was fighting this disease, he exhausted all of his sick time, his vacation time, his paid holidays. And, lucky for us, the fire department was kind enough to pool their time for him so that he didn't have to miss treatments. And, when he felt nauseous and he had neuropathy and he was vomiting, he was able to recover at home. So that was huge for us. And that really is, like everybody knows, that's the brotherhood. That's the brotherhood of what this profession is. They stick by your side. They stick by their own. They do what needs to be done. But what are we doing for them? What are we doing? I have to think, and I have to know that everybody here on this panel today has somehow in some way been affected by cancer. And since my husband's passing, I have tried to stay out of the spotlight. We were in the spotlight for years. A few years. Everybody knew of the sick firefighter from New Britain. It wasn't just a statewide thing. He was, it was a national thing. He was on Fox News. It was a national thing. People knew him. People knew us. And for me right now, like I said, I've tried to stay out of the spotlight. I've tried to live a little bit more of a private life for the kids, more so that they have more normalcy than all of the craziness that we've had for 5 years, 6 years. So if there's one thing, the one thing I need to press today, the main goal here today is for you to understand how zero benefits can affect a family. I know there was the wage replacement benefit. That plan seemed like a good idea, but it's not sufficient and it fell short. Firefighters need more. Their families need more. If I'm going to be honest with you, they deserve more. Workers' comp didn't cover Scott. It didn't cover his diagnosis. So when he died, we got nothing. My kids got nothing. I got nothing. And it's not about that, but it affects families. We don't have medical coverage the way I'm sure everybody else has medical coverage. Scott passed away and we are part of the state. We are on the Husky plan because we didn't get death benefits when he passed. And that's hard. It's hard on many different levels. I keep thinking to myself, what if, right? What if something happens, knock on wood, God forbid, but what if something happens one day? What if I get that diagnosis? What if something happens to one of my kids? We are stuck. We can't go to, say, New York. We can't go to Boston Children's. We're stuck here. We're stuck. And I know a lot of other people are too, and I understand it and I get it. But when you are putting your life on the line, I just feel like there should be more given to these families. And it's not about me. I'm not here for me. I'm here because he's not. And I promised him that I would never stop. So that's why I'm here. I'm not stopping. I can't. It's too important. And like I said, it's not about my family. It's about the families before him. It's the families that are going to come after him. What happens when these men and women get sick? They're in the same predicament as I am. You know, they've worked their butts off for all of these years. They get a diagnosis and they shouldn't have to worry that their families aren't going to be taken care of, because they need to fight and they need to focus on getting better and trying to live another day. And that's the biggest thing that I can push here today, is that, like I said, Scott's not the first. He's not going to be the last to die from cancer on the job. He's not. You know, the men and women of this profession, they take an oath. They protect us. They protect everybody. And they do it knowing what the repercussions could be for them. But what happens to them when they get sick? What happens when they succumb to their work-related illness? And in my eyes, this is a work-related illness. And I don't know why it is that cancer is not considered that. And I don't understand why these men and women who fight like this are not considered line of duty deaths. I feel at this point, it goes without saying that they should be. There's no other reason for us to not think, when they're running into these buildings and they're breathing in these carcinogens, that there's any other reason, especially for somebody like my husband, who, like I said, rode his bike, didn't smoke, had no, family history of this. How did this happen? How did we go from this 198-pound man to this 136-pound man 2.5 years later? He fought hard. He fought a long, hard battle, and unfortunately he lost it. But there are so many men and women out there that are doing this now, and they can't wait. They can't wait, another week. They can't wait another day. This should have happened years ago, but it didn't. And that's okay. It's okay, because we're trying to make it right today. We're trying to make it right now. I know that there was a discussion previously that the cost of this for municipalities would be far too great. But, I lost my husband. My kids lost their dad. So what's the cost of that? Their health care needs to be carried on. Pensions need to be paid out to these families. And again, if you can take anything away from my tears and what I'm saying, we're surrounded by states that do this. They have policies for this. They have things lined up so that when their firefighters get sick, they are covered. We don't have that. And I don't understand why we don't have that. It's not fair. None of this is fair. None of this has been fair. But I don't sit here at night and sit to myself, think, why me? Why this? Why did this happen to me? Why do my boys not have their dad? It is what it is. But this is Scott's story. This is his legacy. And if I can somehow persuade anybody here today to make the right choice, then that's enough for me. That's it. I'm sorry. That's all I have.
Thank you, Caroline, and no need to apologize. I think we all are very sympathetic and empathetic to what you are expressing and what you're feeling, what you're going through. And I think it goes without saying that we're all so very sorry for your loss. and the many losses that we've had due to, you know, firefighters contracting cancer. What I will do now is actually open the floor, because we have had discussions, right? And some of the issues that we've looked at are some of the things that you've mentioned in what you just shared with us. The fact that, you know, what you didn't receive, right? The insufficiencies and the need to have more. You talked about the fact that, you know, you're on state medical, you know, you're on the Husky plan. The fact that you don't have the benefits you had prior to his death, the pension, the financial support, all of those things come into play. And I just think it's a really great opportunity. I always say the people closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And that is a big reason why, you know, you're here today, because the folks that are sitting on this task force have an opportunity to ask you questions and have you ask questions as well as to what it is we're doing and how we can do it better. We all want to address this issue and correct the problem. We have to figure out how we can do that efficiently, effectively, and with the resources and funding that's needed. So with that, I will open the floor. If you guys have questions or comments, anything that you would like to say to Mrs. Johnson, please use the raise your hand feature. I see Senator Kushner has raised her hand, so I will give you the floor at this time, ma'am.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. You know, we had seen you testify before our committee in the past. And first, I just want to let you know what you're doing is incredibly important, because it is critical that we hear from real people about what their experiences are, because it's too easy for us to get lost in the policy questions and not really focus on real families that are suffering. So I really appreciate everything you said. And of course, I'm so sorry for your loss. It is very hard to hear about a young person and a young family in your situation. And I think it really, we have young families. I have, you know, kids who are your age and grandkids, and it immediately brings to mind, you know, how I wouldn't want any of them to experience what you're going through. And so I really appreciate you being here today. I do want to ask you a couple questions, and I apologize if this is, you know, bringing back difficult memories, but I'm curious about what happened with the workers' comp case and how that, if you could give us a little more detail on how you pursued that and what it meant, what happened exactly.
So he didn't, because Scott wasn't, when workers' comp wasn't covered for Scott, for cancer in the city, it wasn't covered. So, you know, you get so much time. Everybody here knows you only get so much time. And when you're getting treatments like this, you know, you're going for radiation, your chemotherapy, and then you're having surgical procedures, you're going back for chemo, you're having other surgical procedures. I mean, this was 2 years, 2.5 years of being at hospitals, being at, you know, cancer centers, traveling to, because at that time he had Blue Cross Blue Shield, we were able to go to Memorial Sloan, right? So like I said, if this was me now, I would not be going to Memorial Sloan. I would be going someplace here in Connecticut, not being able to get a second opinion if I wanted to. So we were able to do that. We got a third opinion, you know, in Boston. He was able to travel to Illinois for, you know, that was the last plea. That was our desperation. That was where we were. That was his last chance, really, right? But that time runs out fast. It runs out really, really quick. You don't realize how quick it runs out when you're sick. So, you know, chemo treatments, you go in for one day, you're knocked on your butt for a few days, and then he would try to go back, and then he would have to come home because he was sick. You know, that time ran out. He used up his vacation. He used up his sick. He used his holidays. He used it all. So the department, because it wasn't covered, were kind enough to, I think it was each individual donated a day. So he had that time pooled together so that he could still work when he could work, but he had that pool so that he could actually get paid, because he would not be getting paid. And obviously when he passed away, there was nothing. I was given from the town, I got 5 months of continued healthcare coverage. And then, like I said, after that, we are on Husky. We are on the Husky plan. And I have looked into insurance, private, trying to pay out of pocket. There's no possible way with myself and 3 kids that I can do that. I'll lose my house, So right now for me, I'm stuck. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. And this is what it is. And this is what I have to do for now. And obviously COVID is not helping matters with trying to get back into employment. Nobody, people are working from home, people are working part-time, and it's crazy, but this is the world that we're kind of stuck in right now. So, that was the biggest struggle for us. It was, not just dealing with his death, it was dealing with everything that came along with it. And you don't even realize what's going to happen until you're thrown into this situation. And, here's your coverage. You are now like the product of the state, and, you're not going to get funds. I have my job. And that's what I have. And, but it's not enough for me to be full-time enough for me to have a decent healthcare plan. So like I said, I'm kind of stuck in limbo, unfortunately. But like I said, these are the cards that we've been dealt.
Well, I appreciate you sharing this with us again. And I think everyone that serves on this task force understands that it's really important that we help the families in Connecticut. What we're struggling with is the best way to do that. And you're telling your story will really help us focus on making sure that we're proposing solutions that will actually make a difference. So thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Senator Kushner. Representative Aurora, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Carolyn, for being here. I think both Representative Porter and Senator Kushner I join them in saying, well, we empathize, and it's very sad that we didn't do more, the state didn't do more, the town did more to help. And these are things where we have to come together to solve these issues. And I also think we need to be very thankful to you for your advocacy to focus us into solving this challenging problem for all firefighters who put their life on the line for us. I personally can resonate in a small way with the pain, and I don't know whether that's the right word. I'm a survivor. I'm a cancer survivor, and I totally understand what you feel. Even in my case, it was an early prognosis, but I can totally feel the fear. I could feel the fear, and I cannot even imagine what you went through, what you're going through. And it is our duty and our absolute focus should be our absolute focus, is our absolute focus, and this committee will and absolutely use every single possibility to solve this problem, solve this problem, to provide the right and appropriate and sufficient and resources to those who give their lives or put their lives online for us. Mm-hmm. I want to also, so I thank you, and I really appreciate and applaud your courage. This requires courage.
Thank you.
I want to ask you questions so that we can get deeper into the problem.
Okay.
The first is that why was worker comp, and maybe, it's just my lack of my knowledge, not why was he not eligible? Why was your husband Scott not eligible for workers' comp? Was it because it was cancer and they don't cover any cancer? Or was it because they said that this cancer was not related to work?
It was because it was cancer.
And so all cancers are excluded under worker comp.
Yeah.
I was under the belief under the impression that only worker comp is very difficult because you have to convince them or sue them at times that it is work related. But perhaps you're really shedding more light that worker comp's program just basically excludes anybody with this disease. So that's something we have to work on, because to the extent that the disease is related to work, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it is a physical injury or other kind of injury, we have to obviously provide for it because it's work related.
Correct.
And what we were told is since that relationship is not that direct, sometimes there is a lot of litigation so that is a very good clarification. Your point of view, your experience was that it was not that the discussion was
The
whether
discussion was never that it was a specific type of cancer. It was the fact that he had cancer.
okay.
That
Okay.
was what I was told from City Hall. That's all I can tell you. I wish I could tell you more.
No, this is what we have to, because this challenge will only be resorted if we understand what are the current system in precise detail, because there are two elements to here. One saying no cancers are covered under workers' comp, and if that is the case, we have to think about solving this problem slightly differently, saying, hey, workers' comp, and then there is another one which says, well, you have to prove it. So, but I thank you for your answer there. The second one is that was he not eligible under pensions because he had worked only 8 years, or what? Because I do understand that after a certain, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, because we would, the other answer we would like to hear or sort to is that if someone who has served, loses their life while working for a job on their job, then the pension should vest. There is certain that element of insurance vested in a pension, so that the family, especially, here we are not talking about somebody losing a life just because, in a different situation, but because of the cause of their job, which just did not happen to be a fire directly, but perhaps a side cause of a fire. So was there any discussion around how the pension vests, or was it because it was 8 years? Was there any view of the world that for other firefighters, is that always the same? Is it because of the town rules? Okay, do you have more kind of things you can share on that issue?
He was on the department for 10 years. It was 10 years and then he passed away. The issue is that he wasn't on it for the allotted time, right? You need to be on there for 20 years to receive your pension.
I see. I understand.
Did not make it to 20 years. He made half of that.
I guess one of the solutions we want to look at is that a faster vesting for those who give up their lives on the line of duty, right? To the extent that it is clearly determined that they'll give up their lives serving us, then perhaps again we have to think through the economics involved and whether the municipality pays, whether the state pays the additional vesting. But that is a possible solution we have to look to, because I would assume that would really be some relief to your family if his pension was vested early.
Yes.
Or I wouldn't say his pension was for his family was vested with the pension. Yeah. because he gave up his life in the line of duty.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in your case, yeah,
I know that there are firefighters right now down in the Stanford area. And these are, I think, the same ones from the last time that we were on here. And, some are doing better, some are not. And, I believe it was Rick Hart that said, if they die and they die before their 25th year, they're not getting anything. Their families are going to lose it. They're going to lose that pension because this individual, this man or woman, whomever is sick, it could be their 24th year. And if they die on their 24th year, they're not going to get a payout, and they're not going to get benefits, and they're not going to get health coverage. So I think that's a huge thing.
But were there any, I understand that because it was less than 10 years or the vesting period is in any pension program, they wouldn't get the normal pension. But what you're telling us is that it is not, this is not as if you left the job and went elsewhere. That's a different situation.
No,
we're not talking about that. We're talking about you fought till the fires, or you did your duty till the very moment you could. And the question here is, even if there is not the complete vesting, you're saying that he did work for 8 years, but he did not have any partial vesting or a third of the pension for the family or a certain fixed payout. There was virtually zero payout from the pension program, which he would have received had he served his 20 years, which he could not because the job related situation, ended his life. So what we're saying is that is the pension or a partial, and this is obviously sometimes beyond the scope of the state committee because every pension has their own program.
Right.
But I think there might be something to think about guidelines that to the extent that in every pension program should be considered, if not forced, to include some payout, whether it be partial or full, should a firefighter get in a predicament which you're defining. And we can, the guideline could be specific consideration given for those who basically contract, get, cancer, because in this case, other avenues like workers' comps are not available. And finally, one more thing I perhaps, you can help us with is, you said that other states have solved this problem. Can you give us kind of, you have very, very detailed knowledge, which we are trying to get to, or we are trying to ourselves get a handle on. Give us which states we should look at, which is doing this right or better, point of view. Which
obviously, it goes without saying, New York is, probably obviously one of the best. I mean, that because we had ground zero, right? We had 9/11. So that's the first and foremost. I know that Boston over the last couple of years just passed this law. Rhode Island, even I think Alabama, which you wouldn't think, but Alabama. I think there's 36 or 37 states now that do this, that, have benefits, that consider cancer line of duty deaths, that consider cancer a work-related illness, so that these families can get their benefits. These families can get medical coverage and these retirement benefits. So there are, I believe it was 36 states, 37 maybe now. But if it was me and I was looking, I mean, like I said, New York they take the cake, right? I mean, we all know that, but Boston's a very good one. Even Rhode Island is a very good one. I believe Florida is another one.
Yeah, New York, Boston, Rhode Island, they are really neighboring states. So I think that's a very good for us to really research. And do they actually, and this may be a question we can do our research, but just in case at the top of your head, if you've looked at this stuff, is thoroughly, since you've looked at this really thoroughly, do they include it in their workers' comp, or do they basically have the state specifically pick up the benefits in the case of firefighters? We can do a research.
I'm not sure.
On you here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I just know that, I mean, we all know, right? You see it on the news every day. Right? Another firefighter that passed away from 9/11. I think it kind of went without saying that any firefighter that was at ground zero is going to have a payout, is going to have their families taken care of. They're going to have their medical benefits. And, for me, it's not, I could care less about one penny. It's really the medical coverage, because it's me and 3 kids on my own. That is the biggest piece. And like I said, I don't need anything else. I don't want anything else. I don't need, I think for any family, when somebody dies like this, you don't realize what goes into planning a funeral. I mean, if you were to tell me that I was going to be planning my husband's funeral at the age of 41, I would have laughed in your face and I would have said, absolutely not. But it's a lot. And you don't realize I didn't realize just how much went into something like that, how much he did, how much people loved him, how much he carried for this family, and I'm sure any other, person in this profession who's doing this profession that is in charge of their family, any person that's sick on this job that has the benefits, that carries the benefits for their family, they don't want to die because they know what's going to happen. That family is going to lose their benefits if they don't make it to their 20 or 25 years. Those families are going to be in deep trouble. They're going to be in the same position that I'm stuck in. And like I said, this isn't for me. It's not about money for me. If you were to say, here's your health benefits, I would have said, great. You know what? I don't need it. I'll figure out the rest. And that's what I have been doing. But the fact of the matter is that, like I said, you've got families that need this now. You've got families that need, if something happens, they need to know that under workers' comp, they are covered. And they're not.
No, this is very insightful. So no, thank you again. What I'm also hearing is that if we have to prioritize the healthcare benefit for the survivor benefit for the families is something we should put on top, because that is what creates the anxiety. Am I,
Yes.
because we want to, because
Yes.
we are considering various benefits, and you're saying, well, here the Husky benefits are what they are, but let the legislator work out some methodology and prioritize the fact that the option to stay in similar not a Husky kind of a program, but in a call it a Blue Cross Blue Shield program, a similar program to there's something which people use, and please pardon me if this analogy is not really valid here. When people move, they get COBRA and they can continue in that program. And sometimes, the employer or the government pays for that COBRA program. And I'm not making any analogy to moving, but what you're suggesting is perhaps what it should be is that program should be available to the similar program should be available to family at a very same kind of at a low or no premium instead of a Husky program. And that should be that would be something, if you had to say, that we should prioritize and think deeply about.
This is just my opinion, but I mean, I don't know what other families would want. I don't know if somebody would want a payout. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're, everybody, any firefighter that puts in their time and they pass away, of course, their family's going to want that pension. They're going to want, because they've busted their rear ends for, like I said, 20, 25 years, and they may not make it to 25. They only make it to 24. That's a long time to be doing a profession where you've gotten sick now and you're going to succumb to this disease because you did something that you loved to do. For me personally, I think I like that. I love that idea. I would have loved for somebody to have said, you know what, this is what we are going to give you. We know, but it's not at all how it happened. Like I said, this situation that I was put in, I would not wish upon my worst enemy. I would not want to see any family have to go through this. It's not easy, and it's not made easy, right? Nothing's made to be easy, but this was not easy. And like I said, the fact that we are on Husky and the fact that it worries me. I mean, I'm getting older. I think about Scott. He was 43 when he died. I've outlived him. but I can get sick tomorrow. And then what do? I'm going to go, I'll go to Hartford Hospital or I'll go to St. Francis, but I can't get second opinions. If I am scared and I want to go to Boston, I can't go to Boston unless I'm paying out of pocket. Now, how am I going to pay out of pocket?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally
You know?
empathize. That's how I was looking at it when, in my personal, size, smaller experience, but totally that you look for the best places, whether they are out of state or in state is not what's relevant. It's the best place where you can get a second opinion possible. You're totally right.
It's
Well,
not even, it's something as simple as, I don't know, taking the kids to New York, right? And having, not that I would go there now, but going to New York, having somebody trip on the, we're going to trip and we've cracked our knee open and now we need to go to the hospital because now we need stitches. I'm paying out of pocket because Husky's strictly Connecticut. So when we go, if we leave somewhere, I'm always nervous. I'm always scared. Are you going to have an asthma attack? I've got a son that has asthma. Are you going to have an attack? What's going to happen to you? Are you going to fall down? Like, it's always in my head about what happens if something happens to any one of them while we are trying to enjoy a family moment. And anybody that has kids knows they get hurt, right? They're going to fall, they're going to break their arm, something's going to happen because they're kids. But anything that happens out of this state, I'm paying for out of pocket because I am with the Husky plan.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for giving us insights. If we were in the same room, I would like to give you a hug, but please, no. It's these are that's why we serve. That's why we raise our hand to be in the legislature. And thank you. I just hope I'm sincerely saying thank you for advocating. Thank you for focusing us on this, and we will use the best of our ability to figure out something which, just as you said, addresses the problem, but and we will have to figure out where the economics comes from, and that's what our objective is going to be, not to say, well, there is no economics, but to say, okay, this is the priority, this is how we're going to pull money or bring money in it and address the issue, which is a real issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Representative Aurora. Next, we have Rick Hart. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Representative. And Caroline, thank you so much again for being on with us today. A couple of things. Representative Aurora, the problem with the pension investing, some departments do not vest. So you could do if they tell you you're vested after 10 years, that may be true, it may not be true. But you get nothing, as Caroline said. The other issue is, even if you were vested at 10 years, you'd only get 25% or 20% of your pay, because the numbers are, your multiplier is either 2% or 2.5%. So you'd only get 25% of, at best, of your pay, or what your pension should be. So that's a big issue. And like Caroline said, the health insurance, being on Husky, I've got a solution that I think would work. Well, going back to the pension, where the state of Connecticut, you're the legislature, you can mandate that if someone dies in the line of duty from occupational cancer, you can mandate that they're paid their pension. You have that power. Boston, any firefighter that is diagnosed with cancer that dies is it's considered a line of duty death, and they're given full benefits. If we wanted to split the baby and mandate that they would pay the past firefighter their pension that they would deserve, or treat it as a line of duty death so that the family receives their full pay for life. Why can't we enroll them automatically into the state partnership plan? Then it's a division that the municipality has already accounted for the pension for their members as far as payout. And if they don't want to accept the burden of the insurance, then and have them automatically be enrolled in the state partnership plan. That's it.
All right, thank you, Rick. Senator Kushner, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you. And I just did want to point out something I think very important that you said, Caroline. And I think you mentioned that you think that we owe it to the firefighters, and you didn't use those words. You said they deserve it. And I'm using that word. I think we have an obligation to our first responders who risk their lives every day, every time they go to work. I think it is our obligation to make sure that they are taken care of when they fall ill and that their families are taken care of. And, you know, we just have to figure out the best way to do it. Of course, this task force is charged with the responsibility of making recommendations. You know, I think Rick Hart made some really good points just now. We will look at the other states. I know that our OLR, John Moran from OLR, from the Office of Legislative Research, is here, and I know he's looking into what other states do. And what I hope is that we take the best of what other states do and we make that the law in Connecticut, because we should be able to have the strongest protections for our first responders in the nation. I think that's critically important. And so, you know, when you said how much you feel that your husband deserved, we feel that he deserved that and more. And we thank you for giving him to us, for the service he provided to New Britain. And, you know, I fully expect this task force will make recommendations that will change this for families going forward, including yours. It should address the people who have already lost so much. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner, and I do concur with all that's been said. I think it's a given that that's how we feel. I think it should be a given that this is a line of duty death, especially when we're talking about fire, and we know that the chemicals and things that they're exposed to are carcinogens, right? So there's no correlation or no connection, or this is something totally out of thin air, or it's like, you know, firefighters are trying to rip off workers' comp or anything like that. This is something that is, you know, truly owed to them. And Senator Kushner and I had this discussion not too long ago. We can't believe that, you know, this is actually the case. It seems like we don't have much of a choice. We have to come to some kind of conclusion and solution around making sure that these first responders who are serving their beloved community, that the beloved community serves their family if that needs to be the case. And I'm just really, I've heard it, but to hear it from you and to hear the details of, you know, your concerns, I don't think that many people think about the fact that you have to be gravely concerned if you leave the state of Connecticut, because you have young boys who could be injured and you could land yourself in a deficit of debt that you can't afford to pay, which can impact what? Your college. You know, I'm just looking down the line at how things could be impacted just from one accident outside of the state of Connecticut. And I'm looking forward to having conversations with the members of this task force and with Rick Hart in particular, because he has a lot of knowledge around this and he has done work on this in prior years on how we address the pension issue. I was just making some notes as you were talking, and I was like, you know, maybe we look at a graduated scale. You know, if you're 10 years in and you need 20, you get half. You know, if you're 15 years in and you need 20, you get 3/4. And I do want to say what you said, just to reiterate, you know, medical benefits may be very important to a family like yours, understandable, but it may not be as important to a family that has, you know, adequate or sufficient coverage, or affordable coverage, I should say, because that is the issue, right? The healthcare is not affordable. Right. It's not that you don't want to pay for it, you can't afford to pay for it. So I think that we have to take all things into consideration. And you talked about it wasn't sufficient and that there needed to be more. And we understand that for you, the medical is the priority. We've talked about pension, but I mean, is there anything else that we haven't thought about that you think firefighters and their families in situations such as yours should have access to? Like, is there something else that's needed that we're not thinking of?
I think I will, this is just, I'm going to go back now. This is probably more, this has nothing to do with benefits. This is more of a mental thing for these men and women.
Mhm.
I think that when something like this happens on a department, these men and women don't know how, they see things that you and I would never want to see, right? They see things, they walk into things, they never know what they're going to walk into. They don't know if somebody's going to lose their life. They don't know really ever when they go on that call, what they're walking into. And I think when something like this happens mentally for these men and women, I think that there should be something given to it's, I don't know if it's almost like a therapy. I'm here to tell you, I know of so many different individuals on Scott's department who still struggle with that loss, with his loss. I mentally, I think that there should be something in place for these men and women when something like this happens. And again, that's got nothing to do really with these benefits or retirement or pension. That's just me thinking of them because I've watched it unfold. I watched it. I had a front row seat to watching, these men and women and listening to them cry and scream in the hospital room, like next door. And I remember I can hear it in my head still to this day of these grown men screaming, and they still haven't dealt with that loss.
I appreciate that. And, I do sit with a group of firefighters from around the state of Connecticut that it's a support group for exactly what you just described, because they're still working on, addressing these issues. We have passed a bill, Senator and I, and the ranking members to address, the PTSI and the fact that they need to be able to get some kind of compensation for that to address those issues.
Correct.
With you bringing that up, the thing that I thought about, and I don't know if it's covered with Husky. So my question to you is, your children were very young when they lost their father, 8 and 5, right? The twins were 5 and your oldest was 8. So was there any kind of therapy that was available to you through the Husky plan as far as therapy and counseling and that kind of thing?
Yep. We've been in therapy since he passed away, and we still go.
Okay.
Obviously we can't go face to face, but we do our Zooms, and we're still doing it. I don't have a choice because there are good days and then there are bad days. And while everybody celebrates these holidays, it's not so easy here.
I know. I can completely understand that. I'm really glad to hear that, because I know how important therapy and counseling is, and how untreated trauma can manifest into some really ugly things. So I'm happy to hear that. And I don't see any other hands that are raised. So I'm going to give my chair and my ranking and Rick Hart, he actually asked some questions, the last opportunity to say something before we move on.
Hello.
I'm sorry. Yes, David, are you there?
I did have a couple of questions and comments, if I might.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand.
That's
You have
quite all right.
You have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very sorry, Mrs. Johnson. That's horrible what you went through. But I just want to clear up a couple of things that maybe you were misinformed about. Anyone has a right to make a workers' comp claim for cancer. It's not an easy claim to make, but there's no prohibition in the law that prevents you from pursuing that. I just wanted to make that one point. And the other question I have is, did you apply or did your husband apply for a job-related disability pension? I assume the city of New Britain has one of those.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I honestly don't know.
I've been dealing with public sector employees for 40 years. Most municipal fire pensions or police pensions provide either a normal pension, an early retirement pension, a job-related disability pension, or a non-job-related disability pension. Typically, if it's a job-related disability pension, like someone injures their back and can no longer be a firefighter, usually no amount of time on the job is required for that. People can get that after a week on the job, and it's happened. So I assume New Britain has something like that. I'm pretty sure that they do. I just wondered if you had applied and if that was even brought up to your pension board.
I didn't apply. I would have to actually go back to City Hall and ask if he ever did. I'm assuming no, or
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. I was just pointing that out.
That would be an HR question, correct? I would go
Yes.
to HR and ask, okay.
Sure. So one of the other things I wanted to point out about health insurance is there's actually a law on the books right now that affects only public sector employees. It's 31-284B without the parentheses. And what that says is as long as an employee is collecting or eligible to collect workers' comp benefits, their employer has to maintain all of their insurance benefits as they had them on the date of injury. The bad thing about the law is it only talks about employees. So there actually was a Supreme Court case involving a widow in the city of New Haven who said that she should be eligible for these continued insurance benefits. And our Supreme Court said no, because it only deals with the employee, not the claimant. So if that statute could be amended, assuming there is a rebuttable presumption that we could all agree on, that health insurance would automatically flow to you if you had a compensable claim. I think it's a horrible little tweak in the law that doesn't affect a ton of people, but let's say your husband, again, let's say he had a bad back and could never work again due to a job-related injury, he would get insurance forever, period, as he had it on the date of injury. But if he died, you as the widow would get nothing, which doesn't make sense to me. But that's the state of the law right now.
Okay.
And it's sort of a template, and I think I had mentioned this before. I've done a lot of cases under the State Heart and Hypertension Act. The problem with the State Heart and Hypertension Act was the municipalities were not able to raise a defense. So if they could prove the heart problem was not caused by work, it was basically what you'd call an irrebuttable presumption. The job relation was irrelevant. The state police and a number of other state employees have a presumption that their cardiac condition is caused by the job. Those laws are still on the books. So if you have a rebuttable presumption, at least the municipalities have the right to raise a defense. And also they would not be self-insured as they had been under the Heart and Hypertension Act. The other thing I want to point out, and this is something that most people missed under the Heart and Hypertension Act, is you not only got the same workers' comp benefits that you would get as if the job caused it, but you were also entitled to the same pension benefits that you would be entitled to as if the job caused it. So that's already been done. It's already passed scrutiny by our Supreme Court. So both of those things are very doable. Again, what caused the huge expense and the reason that Heart and Hypertension Act was repealed is there was no insurance. Number one, no insurance to cover it. So these towns were getting killed. And secondly, the municipalities couldn't raise a defense. So again, I think all of those are fixable if the legislature could agree on a rebuttable presumption. Maybe anyone that smoked isn't entitled or whatever you think is appropriate to put in. But then someone someone like Mrs. Johnson would be able to have, some kind of income to raise her kids and have insurance that she certainly deserves.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey. That was a lot of great information you shared, and definitely something that this task force will be discussing. I found a lot of that interesting, especially 31-284B, and the fact that we can actually amend that to include family and not just employee. Were there any other task force members that wanted to make a comment or any questions for Mrs. Johnson? Okay. Well, we've already thanked you. We can't thank you enough for actually taking the time, making the time, I always say taking, but actually making the time to be here to help to support in this effort that we have to address this. Senator Kushner, I'm not sure if you wanted to have any remarks for Mrs. Johnson before, because I don't see any need in us holding her up while we continue with this discussion on the issue.
No, I don't have any more questions but again, just thank you so much for being here, and we'll stay in touch. We appreciate the fact that I know Rick Hart has been in touch with you, and we'll continue to monitor this, and certainly we'll let you know. I'm confident there will be proposed legislation from the Labor Committee for the next session, and obviously we'll let you know so you can be prepared to testify again, and just know that what you're doing is incredibly important, and we appreciate it.
I just have a quick question. When is the next session? Is February?
February 9th.
Okay.
But the public hearings won't be until a bit later than that. Not a lot later than that, but a few later.
Okay.
All right, and I just really want to thank you again. What you're doing is brave. That's the first thing I think of when I think about how you're still finding the strength to advocate for Scott and your boys. And just, we send you lots of love. We are supporting you in any way that we can, and hopefully this bill will be an added addition to that support. But you know that you have the love and support of a huge community, not just the firefighters, brothers and sisters, but people at the State House as well. We feel blessed to have met you, to know you. The unfortunate story, I believe that there's a silver lining in everything. And I can't wait to hear from you, how that silver lining grows for you and your boys.
Me too.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody listening today and you inviting me back so I could, share Scott's story again. And like I said, let you know how this affects a single parent, raising 3 crazy children in the middle of
rambunctious boys
in the middle of, this pandemic that we're in.
Yes.
So
And I see Representative Aurora's come back on. I wasn't sure if you wanted to have any closing remarks with Mrs. Johnson or not before we let her go.
No, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Great.
Thank you again, Mrs. Johnson. And we will certainly be in touch with you to let you know what the status of this task force is leading into the session. And just be blessed and be encouraged.
I will. Thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.
You as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so I think that we have gleaned a good amount of information. I think there has been more revelation around the personal impact that families are dealing with when it comes to the task of making ends meet once something like this happens with a first responder, such as a firefighter. At this point, we have opened up the discussion on the issues. So I will open the floor to any of the members that would like to talk about, and I actually would like to have further discussions on what David Morrissey was talking about around the work that you've done with the public employees and the suggestions that you have for the task force going forward as far as what you think would be feasible, right? What would be effective and efficient to address the needs of these families? Okay, Senator Kushner, I see your hand and he's not responding, so I will give you the floor. Thank you.
Yes, I want to note that I know that we received comments from attorneys Morrissey and Drapo, and I much appreciate those. And you have commented on these issues in the previous meetings. What I was thinking, though, is that I think it would really help us, given that you both have dealt with workers' comp and public sector workers and the heart and hypertension cases. I think, these are somewhat complicated and detailed and specific. And for those of us who are not professionals in this field, it would be really helpful if maybe the two of you could work a presentation for our task force for one of our future meetings, either, hopefully the next meeting in 2 weeks, where you could actually do a presentation that would help inform us to the specifics, and that way we could then ask you questions at that time. But I think it would be helpful. I know I've heard about rebuttable presumption. I know there will be a considerable amount of pushback on that, since we've tried to do that even recently related to COVID and had difficulty. But I think it's still a very important piece of the equation, one that I would like to see us fully understand so that we could make a case, because I make the case for that. I believe that that is something that would address much of what's been discussed. So I think if maybe that would, Representative Porter, maybe that would help us at the next meeting if we had a sort of a presentation, and then we could all focus in on rebuttable presumption, sort of the history of hypertension, heart and hypertension, and what that has meant, and look at this 31-284B, how all that interplays. The other piece of this that I've heard that I would make a recommendation that we pursue as well is that we look at the pension aspect of this, and both attorneys could help us with that, as well as Rick Hart, because clearly looking at, and I believe Representative Aurora mentioned this as well as you did, Representative Porter, that looking at how we perhaps could bridge the pension eligibility, so that we are looking at that as another potential resource to find solutions. So, we have, in the course of the last several meetings, I think we can create a list of potential solutions and keep adding to that list as we move through it, and maybe review that as well at the next meeting. So, I hope that the attorneys would be willing to help us in that way.
Be happy to do that. Am I muted? I was muted before.
No, you're not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think Attorney Drapo and I could certainly get together, and whoever else would want to be a part of that is fine. The 284B is really an easy fix. You just change the word employee to claimant, and that way widows are covered not only for this but other deaths caused by work, and it only affects public sector employees, not private sector. That's preempted by ERISA, so it would be a small sector of the population affected by that. And again, I think the Heart and Hypertension Act is a good template, but if you put a rebuttable presumption, I think you eliminate a lot of the problems or expenses that were caused by not allowing these municipalities to even present a defense. They really got killed financially. So you could have a 300-pound police officer who smoked and had a horrible lifestyle, and that evidence was irrelevant. If it's a rebuttable presumption, obviously all that stuff would come in. The municipalities could defend whatever cases they felt are appropriate. So I guess my question number one is, do you want us to draft what we would think is appropriate legislation? Excuse me.
Yes,
And then secondly, I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, but I know originally there was some talk about the volunteer firefighters. And I think I was told there were 20,000 some odd volunteers. Are we just dealing with paid firefighters, which I think total 6,000 versus 26,000? I would assume that's what you would want to do.
yes, but I will let Senator Kushner weigh in on this as well, because we were having a discussion around the fact that, you know, the volunteer fires are not covered in the same fashion that public are or
Right.
paid. So
Right.
if that's something we could look at as well.
I think that we do have to look at the volunteer firefighters, and that was raised, I believe Von Dumas raised that in our last meetings.
Yes.
One of the things that I found very discouraging is that we did have a bill that was actually a DOL, an agency bill that came before our committee to protect volunteer fire departments by requiring them to adhere to the Connecticut Occupational Safety and Health Act and the OSHA. And there was a case that found a loophole that they were not covered. And so I know Mr. Adamson has talked a lot about prevention, which I believe is also key and something that should be part of our recommendations. Prevention is very, very important. And we don't even have the authority through the Connecticut Department of Labor to enforce Connecticut OSHA requirements on volunteer fire departments. So that's clearly something we're going to try and get this year. But I do believe that we should be thinking about how do we address volunteer fire companies. It's a different situation than the career firefighters, but we shouldn't completely leave them out.
If I could, just two more points I just have questions about. In listening to Mrs. Johnson, the medical bills of her husband didn't seem to be an issue. Most municipal employees have really good insurance. And if this was made compensable, whereas the workers' comp carriers are going to pay those bills, I think the cost would be dramatically increased. If it's only an indemnity statute where they would be paid a workers' comp benefit as with the widow, I would assume that would cut the cost dramatically. I don't know by how much. And then the other question I had is, I know there's a number of cancers listed. Would it make sense to kind of zero in on a few, or is it every cancer that exists? It just seems to me if you ask for everything, you get nothing. I'm not a lawmaker, that's you guys. But would you prioritize the types of cancer? I mean, pancreatic cancer is a killer. Prostate cancer you can kind of deal with. So I don't know if that's been discussed or not.
Yes, and I would say that we do know there are certain cancers that are mostly associated or seen as job related for firefighters, and I think that those should definitely be prioritized. I think that we can also just look at the case by case, you know, what the cancers are. I think that we would find some commonality there. I'm not sure, haven't done that, but I think that's something that we can work on gathering data on.
So I mean, I'm happy to meet Bud. I assume you and I can get together again.
Sure, of course. Yep.
My turn to pay for lunch this time, but sure.
That's on the record, Dave.
Did we want anyone else, I'm sorry, to be involved in that meeting?
I wouldn't mind being in a meeting. I mean, if this is something you're gonna do, are you talking about doing Zoom? I have to ask.
No, someplace where
No,
you
you're
can
not.
have lunch afterwards.
Okay.
Or we could come to the legislative offices. That's sort of.
No,
central to
actually,
Bud
you
and I,
can't.
we could meet in your office if you want, but wherever.
No, actually, we can't.
You can't. Oh, that's right. Okay.
No.
All these new rules.
You know, I suggest that we take this discussion of how to set up that meeting offline. I know there's a number of hands right now, but
Yes, there are, and I'm keeping track. So I do know that we have Representative Aurora, followed by Mr. Adamson, followed by Mr. Hart. So at this time, if you're finished, Attorney Morrissey.
Yes, I am.
I didn't mean that. You are, okay, thank you. Representative Aurora, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things I want to point out. The first is that, the issue here, especially with regard to the testimony we heard from Ms. Johnson, was it appeared to me that the diagnosis of her husband was such that it was not presumed to be a job-related injury or a job-related ailment. And that's why the workers' comp didn't work. That's why pensions, there was no discussion of pension. That's why she did not get any survivor benefit from the department itself. It is as if, I work for a great company or a good employer, and it was presumed that, hey, I just, for genetic reasons or whatever reasons, I developed this particular situation. And I think that's why, and perhaps that's what Attorney Morrissey kind of explained to us, that if there were a very clear the relationship is very difficult to establish and prove. So if you went to workers' comp, they would ask for proof, and it would be pretty much impossible to prove that her husband's condition of colorectal cancer was caused because of firefighting, and that's why we are talking about, from a point of view of, is there a change in law? Because in the current system, the way it is set up, it would be impossible to prove. So what we are saying is, but then there is the other element of the equation, which is not obviously in the case of Ms. Johnson, but many other situations. We know there is a large number of cancers or people who develop cancers who may be firefighters, but it may not be a reason for firefighting, in a sense that every firefighter's cancer is not because of their job, because we do know that even if people who do not go into firefighting develop cancer at a certain rate. And the studies which we have seen, and obviously there's no conclusive study, but they are all good studies, is that about a quarter of the cancers that firefighters develop are related directly to their job. The remaining are just like you and I or many other people would have risks for such disease. So the challenge which we face as a committee is, how do we do that balancing act, and who gets the role of figuring out whether are you in that 75% who would have gotten the disease irrespective, or are you the 25% who got it as a result of firefighting? It's a very tough problem. And that's why we are kind of seeing it as a tough problem to make that differentiation and to allocate a body or a process or a procedure to make that differentiation. Obviously, one suggestion is make everybody by default, if a firefighter has a cancer, to be related to work, and let the others prove it wrong. And that would be one way to approach it, but it would be more relevant if a majority, more than 50 or 60 or 70%, the studies or any studies would say of cancers in firefighters were caused due to work. Studies are saying, which I've read and pointed out by other members in this group, it's more like a quarter to 20% to a quarter. So that's a big issue. I think we need to focus on it, because if it were proven in Ms. Johnson's case that this was clearly a firefighting related disease, just like Attorney Morrissey suggested, if it was a back hurting, and it would be very clear that the back hurting was because of something happened at the job, they would have much better benefits, and everything would fall in place, and this committee would be redundant. So once again, I point out that how we resolve this problem, it is a tough problem because it applies only to 25%. So the idea that we make it for all 100% by making a non-rebuttable presumption or making a basic presumption has its own challenges. So that was my comment I wanted to make, because I'm going to be thinking about what is a possible compromise or possible way to bridge the two. The second thing perhaps I wanted to clarify was, Senator Kushner, you had suggested to the attorneys on this committee to give us ideas or actually write a law, because I think we're still discussing write a legislation which would fix this, because we're still discussing the various elements of this problem and how we're going to go through it. And I was not clear whether you were suggested just write a legislation which would fix it, or to basically educate us on the element of certain pension intricacies which may be involved, because we are still discussing and getting to the bottom of it. Just as today, it was more clearer to me on certain aspects of the discussion of what we're trying to solve than it was last. So I just wanted to clarify what you had suggested to for the attorneys in the group to provide or to discuss with us or to do in the next few days. Madam Chair, back to you.
Thank you, Representative Aurora. Senator Kushner, you have the floor.
I specifically was asking if the attorneys could do a presentation to inform us. But I also think that their recommendations would be very helpful to us. When asked by Attorney Morrissey if it would be helpful to have legislative language, I have to say we often receive legislative language proposals for bills from advocates. And I think that that's very helpful when we do have it. It doesn't mean that will be the language that we adopt in a bill. We always have OLR working on bills and making sure that we're getting it right. But I understand, Representative Warren, we haven't adopted recommendations from the committee as of yet, but it is always helpful to have a head start on legislation, especially in a short session. It doesn't commit us as a task force to adopting that as our recommendation or within our report. But I would be interested to look at their suggestions for how it could be fixed, because they're so familiar with the law, having worked on. And I want to clarify, I was suggesting about workers' comp. Primarily, I think that's where their expertise is. On the pension issues, there's some, obviously we heard from Attorney Morrissey about pension issues, but I think there are some other folks too that may have expertise in what pensions exist in the state. So, I think we're looking to get as much information as quickly as possible.
Was that it, Representative Aurora?
No, Madam Chair, thank you for that clarification. I would really welcome a presentation, but I'm very concerned about legislative language or jumping the gun, because I do think there's a possibility that what Mr. Adamson had pointed out, that the preferred solution might be an insurance solution. I think there is a possibility, and I think he also pointed out the risk of going into worker comps because of the added cost to municipalities. So I think perhaps if you would indulge me, that we should have a two-step process. The first step of really discussing the pros and cons of all the 4 or 5 areas which we're talking about how we determine whether a cancer is related to work or not, and whether there should be some presumption, what kind of benefits come from pension, as well as possible buying of some disability insurance, as Mr. Adamson had suggested. And finally, should the state put in some more money, which obviously the last law had required or was trying to do. So, if you indulge me, we can just at this point ask for a presentation, and then, depending upon which, how the consensus emerges from all of these various ideas, perhaps we can lean one way or the other. And at that time, either perhaps it is the lawyers who focus on workers' comp who write the language, or perhaps Mr. Adamson, who focuses on insurance, who may be suggesting legislative language. That's just my takeaway or my thought process here, that we shouldn't be jumping a gun and keeping this thing open so that we look at all possible solutions. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Aurora, and I can assure you that we are going to take a full scope on all of the information that we have at our access before moving forward. And with that, I believe that Rick spoke. Okay, how did this go? I'm a little Rick Hart. I believe you're next, followed by Bill Adamson. Is that correct?
I think Bill had his hand up first.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Thank you for your honesty. Mr. Adamson, you have the floor, and thank you so much for your patience.
No problem. Rick, you could have gone first if you wanted to. Is that all right? Sir, you mentioned on the volunteers, I want to clarify something about this OSHA issue. I didn't follow you on that.
Do you want me to respond to that, Representative Porter?
Yes, Senator Kushner, you may respond.
So the agency came to us actually several sessions when I first was elected in my first session, 2019 was the first I became aware of it. But Department of Labor came to us and asked us to close a loophole in the way the statute is written, because the volunteer fire departments are not covered by Con OSHA. And we have attempted to do that and have not been successful yet in getting that passed.
You mean so they're not required to meet certain OSHA requirements? Because typically OSHA would just cover you in the firehouse. Once you're out on the fire ground, OSHA doesn't apply because it can't. It's not a structured.
I'm talking about the fire departments the volunteer firehouses do not come under Con OSHA. For training, they don't get the training, they don't get any of it. And that was, it's a difficult issue. There was litigation in the state a number of years ago by the city or the town of Goshen, and I believe that's been the case that determined that there was this loophole. And hopefully we can close that, because I think, I've spoken to volunteer fire chiefs in the volunteer fire departments in my district, and they would very much like to have access to Con OSHA because of the benefits that are provided of getting training. And I think it would be helpful for all the firefighters. It's a different topic here, but it came up I brought it up because I think it sort of underscores some of the things you were talking about, prevention. And if we're looking at prevention is something, I totally agree with you, we should be looking at broadly. I think we probably all agree that we should do as much as we can to going forward to preventing these cases where, I know Mrs. Johnson spoke about some of the practices that have now been adopted that hadn't been there in the past in terms of, washing uniforms, showering immediately, some of the things that you've raised. And I just wanted to point out that in that context, we ought to be sure that we're covering the volunteer fire departments as well.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I understood it completely.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion here. Mrs. Johnson's comments were very helpful in understanding that this isn't just a cancer issue from the standpoint of, benefits for and appropriate economics for cancer victims and from the firefighters. But, there's a pension issue, which I didn't recognize, which is significant. It's a cliff pension. You either get there for 25 years, get nothing. Doesn't make any sense to me at all. So that obviously, hopefully, is within your power to do something about. The healthcare issue as well. I'm just shocked that there's a system that would limit people to only coverage in the state. I don't know of any healthcare program across the U.S. Even Medicare covers you in every state. If you go overseas, you got to get your own coverage. But it's just unconscionable that someone would be basically going bare if you step outside the state. I mean, if anything, you guys need to change that immediately. It's so wrong. She goes on a traveling soccer trip to one state over, and the kid breaks his leg, and put them, like you were saying, Representative Porter, that it could have a big impact on their whole financial wherewithal. I mean, I'm just shocked by that. So, that's hopefully on the list to get fixed. Mrs. Johnson did comment about 37 states. There's varying presumption laws out there in every state. Some of the presumption laws predate 9/11, but they vary from not a lot of coverage to Arizona, which went to strict liability with no rebuttal. And each of those has a varying cost associated with it. I'm certainly not in favor, just to read it again, anything that requires a cancer victim to try to present their case to get coverage, because it takes too long and the litigation is just too tough on someone. Who wants to go through litigation? I believe there's comment about coverage for 9/11. I'm not sure whether that's a federal program in New York, but anybody who was involved in 9/11 has coverage for, the medical and line of duty deaths resulted from that. That was a separate program. I almost wish Washington would have just said anybody for cancer in the fire industry, they'd funded it inside up and we all would have been better off, but they didn't decide to do that. I did have a question about that came to mind later after Mrs. Johnson got off. And maybe Mr. Hart can answer this, do most of the career firefighters have group life insurance coverage?
Mr. Hart?
Through you, Madam Chair. That's a individual contract issue, so it depends on the specific contract within the municipality. But I believe most do.
Yeah, because I would think, most obviously firefighters are subject to a higher degree of, potential death cases. But, again, growing up in the financial service industry, when you sign up, you usually have some sort of group life that protects you because, a firefighter could get hurt fatally outside of work, could trim a tree and fall. And you would want your family to have some coverage in the form of life insurance to protect against, that for hopefully very remote probability. So I was just curious whether life, because I think certainly making sure there's adequate life insurance for all these firefighters is a good idea. And if it's not affordable, that's something that should be considered by the committee because it's more than just on work. If their pay isn't such that they can afford much group life, we should make sure they have adequate life insurance to protect their families.
Thank you.
That's all I had for the moment.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Addison. Mr. Hart, you had your hand raised. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is more to David's question about whittling down the cancer list. As far as all the studies that I've seen, the cancers that are most prevalent in firefighters that are testicular, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, skin cancer, brain cancer, malignant melanoma, prostate, colon, and leukemia. And actually the San Francisco Fire Department is doing a study on breast cancer in women firefighters. So we may want to include that as well.
And the only thing I'll add to that, Mr. Hart, is the esophagus right now, because I do remember hearing that.
Yes. And
Okay. I'm sorry, was that it for you, Mr. Hart?
yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, I do not see any further hands raised, so I'm going to take it as a sign that the discussion on the issues has concluded. I'll give it a second to see if I'm incorrect. Okay, so this brings us to Roman numeral 5 on our agenda. Announcement of next meetings, and our next meeting will be in 2 weeks, January the 18th, same time, 12 noon, Zoom, and you will be getting the link for that along with an agenda prior to that meeting. Before closing, I will just open the floor to see if my Senate co-chair and my ranking member have any closing remarks. Senator Kushner, you have the floor.
No, I just want to thank everyone for the discussion today. I think it was really helpful. And I particularly, again, want to thank Mrs. Johnson, Caroline Johnson, for being here today. And Rick, thank you for making that connection for us, because I think it's critical to hear from people who have experienced this. And she brought it, made it very real for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Kushner. Representative Aurora.
Well, thank you to all, and thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Senator, for the engaging discussions to solve this problem, and thank you to our guest as well for the testimony. I think my suggestion for all the members would be that we kind of start prioritizing and thinking through what we think is high on our mind in terms of what we have heard to address this issue, so that next time when we come, we have a much more next steps kind of a thing, next steps kind of a discussion, and also a little bit of prioritization, because sometimes when I'm thinking about it, and after we log off, I tend to kind of read and spend some time thinking through this issue and researching this issue and talking about it. Sometimes I lean much more to just changes in the way the presumption would work, or changes in the way some of these how do we resolve the issue, which I just discussed a little while ago. And at other times, I think that we need more of a program to basically get it done, because it does appear that if it were clear, if by some miraculous way we had the litmus test to make it clear whose cancer was from the job and whose was not, we do have, both from workers' comp perspective as well as other perspective, kind of things in place. And we can even clarify the pension situation as well, and life insurance, which was very which Mr. Adamson brought up, which should be clear that perhaps there should be an additional the level of fire insurance which everybody needs to carry in a firehouse should be also guided or some guidance about. So not to belabor the points, I think we need to kind of focus on a few things which we think each one of us feel are important and will solve the problem. And so I look forward to January, 2 weeks from now, for the next discussion. And I'll be, doing my work and research and possibly reaching out to others to get to the best answers in this to address this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Aurora. And I do agree. I think that, the next steps as far as what we discussed here today was the request that Senator Kushner had made for the attorneys to actually provide us with a presentation around the workers' comp, which is, so to speak, their wheelhouse, and where they have great experience. And I also would like to just say, I do agree that if there are members that have ideas or are prioritizing in their heads what's, most important to them for us to get to during this process, I would ask that you please, direct all that information to Devin, and then Devin can get it out to all of the members, because I want everyone, that'll be our way of communicating in between now and the 2 weeks. And we all know how to reach one another as well. So there's plenty of conversation that can be had offline in the midst of the 2 weeks that we await to reconvene. And I think that does it for today. I do want to thank Mrs. Johnson again for being here, Rick for the recommendation and the referral. And I want to thank each and every member for joining today, especially our staff. They've been really quiet, but they are really what help keep this machine moving. So thank you all for making the time to be with us as well. And I look forward to seeing you all again in 2 weeks. Be well and be safe. Thank you. And I will adjourn the meeting now. And the time is 1:47 p.m.
Thank you.